Hola clase! Well, we finally made it. Our third and final use of the imperfect versus the preterite. And this is a big one because this is all about storytelling in the past. Now, as you know, clase, all good stories have background information. In other words, we have to set the scene. So notice here, it was a dark and stormy night, writes Snoopy. And Snoopy wants to set the scene. And here it is. It was a dark and stormy night. Now in Spanish, that would be imperfect, because the imperfect sets the scene, tells us the background of the story. So Snoopy's opening line, "It was a dark and stormy night," is a very exciting beginning to his story. But now he has to come up with the second sentence. And so let's see, what does he do with the second sentence? Does he continue with background, or does he go right to the main event? So Snoopy continues with his story and writes a second sentence. But this time, suddenly a shot rang out. This would be considered preterite because it's a main event. So Snoopy has, "It was a dark and stormy night," imperfect. Suddenly a shot rang out, preterite. You can also change it too, as he does right here. Suddenly a kiss rang out. This is considered preterite. It's a main event. It's something that interrupted the background. It was a dark and stormy night. So background is imperfect. Main events will be preterite. As we continue the notes here, we're going to take a look at a story, very simple story, about an accident that occurred yesterday. So let's take a look at that. And we will be deciding imperfect, background information, preterite, main events. So this story, very simple story, is called Un accidente que ocurrió ayer. An accident that occurred yesterday. And if you look at this picture right here, we do not see any accident at all. Why would that be? Well, we're setting up the background. All good stories, as I mentioned before, has some background information, like time, weather, description of things, description of people. So on your handout, there's a list of questions. All of those questions are the imperfect because it's background. Go ahead and answer those questions as you look at the picture. When you're done, flip it over to the other side. Now, after you answer the questions on the first side, remember that was background, all of the questions were in the imperfect, you flip it over to the other side, and we're going to talk about el accidente. This is considered the main events. Notice what happened that night with the gato, el carro, and so on and so forth. Notice the statements where you have the multiple choice. All of the statements are in the preterite because it's relating the main events, relating what happened as far as the accident is concerned. So go ahead and make your decision. Choose which one would be the correct answer. So use number 3 of the imperfect has to do with background information, telling what was happening or giving descriptions of people, places, objects. This is circumstances. We need, in a good story, background information. Also, use number 2 may fit in this part of background information. If you remember, you may have an interrupter. So you say, when I was walking down the street, cuando yo caminaba, vi un accidente. notice how the ongoing action, this was from use number 2, is in the imperfect, caminaba. And then it was interrupted by this accident that I saw. This would be considered background 2, so don't forget. Use number 2 can fit into background information. Now you may ask, well, how do I know? How can I identify background information? And I know that could be particularly difficult, so I came up with an acronym called law tape. And this would be background information law tape. The first is location. You may want to say where the event was taking place. Yo estaba en la tienda, for example. That's the L. Age, class A, is always in the imperfect. You may want to mention how old you were or how old the person in the story was. Tenía 15 años. Weather, as far as background information, like it was a dark and stormy night, would be in the imperfect too. This is relating circumstances. So let's continue with the acronym law tape. The T refers to time and dates. Telling time in the past is always in the imperfect, señoritas. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Eran las 5 de la tarde. Mentioning the date is also in the imperfect. It was March 7th. Era el 7 de marzo. However, there is a distinction now, and that's coming from the word at what time something occurred. That would be preterite. So, el accidente ocurrió a las 5. That would be preterite. So you have to make that distinction. Are we referring to what time it was, or are we saying at what time something happened? That's going to be tricky, but I think you can do it. Let's continue. Now we have the second A. This second A refers to attitudes, what people were thinking, hoping, desiring. Yo quería salir con mi amiga. I wanted to go out with my friend. This is what I was wanting. This is my desire. Verbs like esperar, which means to hope, desear, which means to wish, to desire. Verbs like this are considered attitudes. So we put these in the imperfect. Now we have the final 2 letters in law tape. The P, physical characteristics. In other words, description of people or things. That would be in the imperfect with regard to storytelling. Remember, all of this is storytelling. And so, mi amiga era alta y simpática. My friend was tall and nice. Notice era, because I'm giving a description of her. And then your emotional states would also be in the imperfect, stating how people were feeling. Mi amiga estaba contenta, se sentía feliz. This is background information. So law tape is a good way to determine which part of the story is background and which part of the story is the main event. Let's go to the main events now. So class A, now the main events. Main events of a story will be in the preterite. And the reason why is because they express what happened. If you go back to your story, un accidente que ocurrió ayer, this is the second side, you can see what happened, what occurred, how it occurred. Also, what happened afterwards. This would be main events, and so the verbs are in the preterite. The background, particularly law tape, please remember law tape, will always be in the imperfect. So we'll have quite a number of opportunities to practice with storytelling. The stories I will give you will be in the present. You need to change them to the past, deciding whether or not it's background or main events. Muchas gracias, señoritas. Nos vemos en clase.